Welcome, dear curious readers. I cannot tell you how pleased I am that this book about England's influence on Széchenyi is being published by Pallas Athéné. It's a 10-year effort, but has been well worth it. For Széchenyi deserves to be known, but hardly is beyond Hungary's borders. And I feel not any kind of patriotic feeling, but because it's interesting. Széchenyi is a hugely interesting statesman who should be known. And the book, of course, is published in English, which means it enters into the, one could say, consciousness of the English reading universe. I became interested in the Széchenyi subject through my interest, in fact, in bridges, and of course the chain bridge. But before that, I was given the 1978 edition of Széchenyi's diaries, which was translated from the original German that Széchenyi wrote his diaries into Hungarian. And I had given several talks in London at the Hungarian Culture Center. And I wrote 4 paper studies about the chain bridge and his builder, William Tierney Clark. It was the same thing as with Széchenyi, somebody who really produced, contributed, but wasn't very well known. So I've made every effort to bring William Tierney Clark to the attention of people who visit Budapest. So there is a bronze plaque now on the bridge. And this book, I hope, will do the same for Széchenyi. Széchenyi came over to England on 5 different occasions, and in 1832 and 1834, it had all to do with the building of the chain bridge.
1834, February 22nd. Got up calm. I am in a dilemma. To drop the big undertaking, or not to pay any attention to my health at all. I want to sacrifice myself for the cause.
Diet in Bratislava, Pozsony, they formed a bridge committee to investigate how to build a permanent bridge over the icebound Danube. And they came to England, which was the absolute leading country at the time. If you wanted to peer into the future, you came to England. 1832 was Széchenyi's 4th visit with Count Andrássy, and they immediately made their way to William Tierney Clark in Hammersmith. So if you open your Hungarian passport, which has the chain bridge on the back, was designed in Hammersmith in London. They looked at the bridge, fell in love with it, like into a beautiful lady, and they said, this is it, and they were totally overwhelmed by the sight of it. I did some research in the Hungarian Academy Sciences archive, and they showed me the diary itself and Gyula Viszota's transcription of all of his diaries in 6 very impressive volumes. And they gave me some copies of the original German transcripts. I took them back to London and sent them to a German academic in Berlin, who later became my son-in-law, really had to work for it. He translated them, sent them back to London, about 10 pages. I added some illustrations of who Széchenyi met, what he saw, etc. On my next visit to the academy, they said, oh, this looks rather good, don't stop. So back to London again, and they sent me the 1830-1834 diaries, copies of the diaries, overlapping just before Széchenyi arrived in England and also after. So it's just isn't cut off completely. So I had translation come over the internet, page by page by page. The whole thing was translated exactly as Széchenyi wrote it. This was obviously crying out to be a book. Who would be interested in a totally obscure Hungarian Count's diaries? And that's when I came up with this idea of Foreign Impressions of England, which is a literary genre. I'm a member of the London Library, which has 1 million books, and it's got 150 books on this very subject. So if I can just go over what this book consists of, I asked a very distinguished academic to write the foreword and advice generally. Then I wrote quite a lengthy introduction, so if you don't want to go through the whole diary, there is a sort of summary of it and the important bits. And that is followed by 5 examples, page each roughly, of other foreign impressions of England. So how Széchenyi saw England and his contemporaries, to give it more meaning. So this book, I promise you, will be on the shelves of the London Library soon. The other very important part of this book is Széchenyi's library, or the rather would say virtual library. In 1860, when Széchenyi, who always had emotional problems which come out clearly in his diary, committed suicide, his family took his library, which was extensive, back to Nagyszánk. Then came the negotiations about the Treaty of Trianon, and they were not sure whether Nagyszánk would be in Austria or Hungary. So they took the whole library to Budapest, to the Széchenyi Library, and then somebody sat down and produced a catalogue. That was decided that Nagyszánk will be in Hungary after all. They took the whole library back there, where it was destroyed during the Second World War. So the only thing that has remained is the catalogue. At the academy, they had this catalogue of his library, and I sat down and I wrote out every single English language book, because that's what we are talking about. There are 200 of them. So this whole list is also part of the book. And then in the London Library, to bring this more alive and we can see what Széchenyi saw himself, I chose 30 books which were in his library, and we photographed the title pages. They are also in the book. The book has got 80 or 90 illustrations of those he met and what he saw. I also plotted where Széchenyi traveled on map, contemporary map. That's also folded up in the back of the book. Széchenyi left his diaries to Anton Tesner, who was his secretary. When Széchenyi wrote a letter in English, he corrected it. He had instructions that any compromising matters in the diaries had to be blocked out with black ink. And unfortunately, Tesner was extremely efficient blocking this out. I've been in touch with the British Library, have a whole section about such things, and there is no way to uncover what's underneath the ink. We have lost all this for history, but Széchenyi's privacy has been preserved. I came across the name of a well-known actress, Fanny Campbell, who was a very well-known actress, a great person of the stage when Széchenyi was in London. So I thought, at last we found a lover. But unfortunately, Fanny Campbell turned out to be a racehorse. So that was a bit of a disappointment. And I think this is all I got to say, and hope you enjoyed the talk.
Oh, what a noble and beautiful feeling lived in my chest when I was a boy. In 1955, a book appeared with the intriguing title, Strange Island, Britain Through Foreign Eyes, by F.M. Wilson. The bibliography ran to 17 pages, but the reader who wished to find out anything about the Hungarian Count István Széchenyi's visits would have been disappointed. Although Széchenyi, the greatest Hungarian statesman of the early 19th century, came to England on 5 separate occasions over a period of 19 years and kept a diary written in German, none of it has been published in English. Wilson's omission was not an oversight, but lack of available material. The aim of this book is in some way to correct this deficiency. Its wider ambition is to give a comprehensive view of his musings with the aid of maps, references, and the catalogue of Széchenyi's English library. The diary adds to the panorama of the later part of the Regency and the Industrial Revolution, from the point of view of a foreign visitor who appreciated what this country had to offer. Indeed, the claim can be made that in Széchenyi there was a rare combination of interest in both the pomp and the innovations of the period. A selection of works from the genre Foreign Impressions of England is also included to place the diary in context.
Welcome in Budapest in the bookstore of Pallas Athéné in the Buda Castle. I am Paula Lévay, chief editor of Pallas Athéné Books, and I would like to welcome Mr. Vaci. We are very honored to see you here.
And I'm very honored to be here as well.
This is the Budapest book launch of your book, and it was a very exciting task to work on it. So I'm very happy that you can keep it in your hands after so many efforts and so many years of work.
I'm extremely pleased. In fact, extremely pleased doesn't even tell how pleased I am. After 10 years of ups and downs, a really quality book has been produced. This is just, if I may say, this is the Budapest book launch, but there'll be an English book launch as well in the club where Széchenyi used to go, the Travelers Club. It's just the beginning.
I'm very happy to hear this, and I'm sure that the English readers will enjoy it as much as we did during our works. If you could meet Széchenyi today, what would you ask of him?
Ooh, that's a big question. Because I would be a commoner talking to an aristocrat. What are you going to do to modernize Hungary? And he would then probably give me a whole list of things he has done, his ambition. The reason why I've spent 10 years on this, because I really believe that he should be known, at least somehow known. He was a very great modernizing statesman with great inner strength, and who has done so much for one country. It's probably difficult to think of any country where a father and son have done so much for their country, to modernize their country. So I think he deserves it. And that's why I spent 10 years. It's nothing to do with that I was born in Hungary, patriotism. It's purely my interest and commitment that he should be better known.
Could you describe us his personality? Because I think that these diaries are sometimes very personal. And what would the readers learn about Széchenyi if they read this book?
Well, there's no doubt about it. He was a very troubled person, which really comes out in his diary. Sometimes there are entries where how shall I shoot myself with a pistol or a gun? Things like that. But the next day he recovered and he was off again trying to get bankers interested in investing in Hungary. He also had very acute observations about things he saw. He traveled on the Liverpool-Manchester Railway, which was the very first regular railway service in the world. He traveled on that, and of course he was still beginning, it slowed down when it went uphill, but he could see that this will be it. And great energy and very great determination. The chain bridge came about because he just wouldn't give up. There are lots of people in the trades who didn't want the chain bridge to be built. They were quite happy with the bridge of boats because they had an income from it, but he wouldn't give up. And if I may say, with a little modesty, the book has come about because I wouldn't give up.
It's a pity that he finished his life so early. Do you know about his other plans? What would have he accomplished if he had some more time?
Well, we know what happened to Széchenyi. Of course, it was a very fraught period for him during the 1848 revolution. But the strange thing is, there was this struggle, but the bridge carried on being built. And they were pulling up one of the chains, and he was on a boat. They made a film about this called Hidember. And then the whole thing crashed down because it's not the chain that failed, but it's one of these links that was pulling it up. And I'm certain that had a great deal to do with his nervous breakdown. He was totally distraught. There was the revolution, and he had loyalties to the Habsburgs, it's known, and then it was a complete breakdown. He had to be tied up to be taken to Dublin. I'm not a historian, I was just purely interested in Széchenyi's diary as related to England, because I've lived in England for 65 years, and a country I regard very highly. So this comes entirely into my subject matter, which is the British-Hungarian cultural relations.
This would be my final question. What is the message of this book to the present generations, to the Hungarians and to the British? What do you think?
Go out and find out. That's what it is. Go out. But I think that's in the Hungarian spirit. The Hungarians do go out and try and put up with a bit of hardship to learn.